Okay. Awesome. Hey, folks, who is listening live, thanks for joining in. Just give it another minute while we actually start. So this is currently going live on LinkedIn right now. We'll put it up on YouTube after this is done. Okay. All right. Okay, I think let's get started while people join, right? So, folks, thanks for joining in. Thanks for taking time on a Saturday, coming and attending the session. This is a session I'm super excited about. Praveen and I, I'll introduce him in a bit. We've spoken about this for a while, actually for years now. And this is something we always wanted to do. So I'm really happy that we are actually starting with this at this point. But before I go ahead, I want to put out an important disclaimer about this particular topic. The conversations or the topics or the problem statement that we are going to raise in this particular webinar is purely, our individual observations and opinions. We have some experience in this industry. We're going to draw upon this experience and observations we're actually going to see, and we're going to make some comments. This is no way, a reflection of any other company that is actually out there in the market, not focused on any specific company, including the past employees that we've had. It's purely a general observation about the industry, which we personally, feel strongly about. We want to call it out. We also want to discuss about what we can actually do to make things better in how people, run operations in this particular manner, right? So that disclaimer is out. With that aside, I would really love to, welcome Praveen to the show.
Thanks, Bala. Thanks for having me today. Super excited. I think we have been speaking about this, like you said, for quite some time. But
Yeah,
it's to be discussing in a broader forum like this. Really looking forward to see how this goes today.
Awesome. So before I start, right, like a little bit of an introduction about Praveen. So personal note is that I've known him for about 8 years now, and we are really, really close friends. But that aside, I'll probably talk about his experience a bit, right? So Praveen, this is just, I'm going to read it out of notebook because I might skip a few things. So Praveen graduated in, computer science from BITS Pilani, and he also graduated from marketing and entrepreneurship specialization from ISB, Indian School of Business. That's exactly where we ended up meeting. He started his career as a game developer and worked in companies like Zynga and Ibibo. So despite being a game developer, he always found his love for customers and businesses thinking when he interacted with customers on the job. So that helped him empathize and build products along with writing code. So typically how, all great product managers actually start getting into product. So one of his lifetime goals is to be part of or build $1 billion startup. Right after ISB, Praveen worked in a bunch of startups like Stazilla, Precharge, Myra, Super Daily, with the recent one being at Swiggy. So he has worked on domains ranging from product-led growth teams to setting up the tech and product for entire supply chain systems across multiple companies. So this is something Praveen and I have in common a lot. It's kind of leads to very interesting conversations on how the whole ecosystem is actually evolving. So we'll double click on that in a little bit of time. So he is deeply interested in understanding what drives human behavior and how to incorporate them in the way we build products. Currently, he has decided to get his hands dirty in starting up and in the process of figuring out what to build next. So outside work, so this is going to be an interesting bit. Outside of work, Praveen is also the co-founder and lead guitarist for a Carnatic progressive rock band called Agam. If you guys have not listened to it, you are really missing out. You should definitely go check it out on YouTube. So there are a bunch of songs which are amazing and very, very refreshing. So formed in 2007, they have released 2 albums and actively touring many countries and performed over 700 plus shows. Agam has been instrumental in taking the traditional Carnatic music to the masses and has created a niche for themselves in the Carnatic music circuit. Awesome. That's quite a bit of a resume.
Thanks,
Uh,
thanks, Paula, for the introduction.
welcome to the show, man. Awesome. Cool. So, like, probably you should start with a little bit of like, I know the formal introduction is actually done, but kind of how you got into product, what interested in you in the supply chain side of things is something you can probably talk about a bit
Yeah,
more.
sure. So, I mean, I think you also mentioned that I started as a game developer. I think this was in 2010, 2012, uh, where I think the concept of product management was just getting started in India itself. So I remember we were a team of 5 engineers and we never really had a product manager. Like now, I think we're able to say what a product manager is, but back then we never had really a product manager. The engineering lead will come up say, hey, we need to launch 2 games. This is how it should look like. This is how the revenue should be, and that's all that was given. Now, with the people that were using our platforms at that point of time, we had to understand how they spend time and what are the games that they play, etc., etc. And then we used to pitch to the engineering leads at that point of time, and that's how some of these games or other what games to build actually started happening. Now, interestingly, as we build the code, we will have a prototype. I know some of these terms are pretty, how do I say, clear at this point of time today, but back then none of these words existed or terms were used, right? So we used to take these MVP to the customers, make them play. They will give the feedback, and then they will say, "Hey, I also need this will be nice." Like I think in 2012 itself, we were able to help people to take the winnings back in the days when 3G even was not there. So in summary, basically, I ended up almost speaking to customers, working with them, getting the feedback, getting what features to build, and after building 2 3 years of code, I felt I enjoyed that part of the business more than actually bringing the game itself into life. I think that's where my realization was that hey, I like doing this more and I want to do this more, and hence I had to go to ISP to understand how business works in general, and that's how I moved from being a engineer to maybe product development part of it. Yeah, in product, I think I started in Stagel and Fridge more on the consumer side of things. In fact, when I joined Myra, I was taking care of the products there. I came from a typical front-end product manager mindset. If I have to increase revenue, then I knew a couple of things: change the UI, change the UX, improve the funnels. I think I never really had an operations background until then. Right, very first principle thinking. Things were good for about 8 9 months. The conversions improved, etc. But eventually, the retention numbers didn't move. Like the average order value was okay, but people will not repeat. The monthly frequency was poor. As a part of the curiosity and typical problem solving that every product manager does, before I realized what problems I was solving, I was actually solving problems in the warehouse and logistics space. That's how it was not that I planned to work in supply chain and warehouses. It so happened that for an operations company, I think it's important to get the promise fulfilled correctly. It's important to get the basic promise done to the customers, which is in our case was delivering the medicines. And I think for the next 1 year, I had most literally spent every day visiting warehouses, talking to delivery executives, and figuring out what is the best way to solve the problem for the business as well as for the people who are involved with the business, let's say delivery executives or warehouse folks. And that's how I ended up building a lot of products related to warehouse and supply chain. And that experience also helped me in building a bunch of things at Super Early. So that's how I started working in operations, not planned, but I think it helped me realize a lot of human side of things as well as what happens in an operations company and why operations is pretty critical for a service-based companies.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, so, I think I started on the supply chain side a little earlier than you, but pretty much the same, fundamentals, right? I mean, it is always fascinating to work on the consumer side of things until you get into supply chain. At least that's what for me, because I realized that it is, especially for a person who actually loves math, supply chain is like a dream come true.
Yeah.
The moving cogs and like how you're able to influence things in a completely different direction. That's actually quite amazing. Cool. So now let's actually talk about the main topic that we want to discuss today, right? So which is the topic of incentives. So before we get into like incentives per se, let's talk about like what is incentives, what are the alternatives for, how are people using it generally in the market? Just give us an understanding about that.
Sure. So yeah, I think there are how do I say, there are things where you have usually a fixed pay and then there is actually variable pay. Now, I
Right.
think there are different companies who adopt a mix of both. Some people have only fixed pays. Some people have only variable pay, so just basically you work and then you get the pay. So there are these three different kinds of models. On the top of it, you also have this full-time job versus part-time job, which is also called as contracts, right? Where full-time job is basically you get employed in the company itself, and the part-time is basically the payroll is with another company, but you kind of have them on a contract basis. I think the combination of some of these things is typically how a company kind of employs the fleet on the ground or for any other work as possible. I think at this point of time, in the benefit of making business viable, maybe at the books or overall cost itself, I think a lot of people are preferring to go for contract model as much as possible, and that's what I'm seeing as a trend, and avoid all the overheads of other things in the market. So I think that's what is happening at this point of time.
Okay. So it's kind of double click on that, right? Like what does like on payroll, like kind of pay slip look like? Or let's say somebody I have in payroll from a business point of view. Let's say I have somebody on payroll versus I have somebody on contract. What is the difference that I'm seeing as a business? One versus the other. When do I choose one or the other?
So I think if somebody has to be a part of in the payroll of a company, right, then you need to have a certain things by law. For example, PF, like insurance, so a bunch of things you need to give, right? And
you also have leave policies, you have certain other things. All the
there's a lot of rules to follow by. Now, in a way, we need to think about it as all these other things, all the things that we just discussed is being handled by another firm. And typically the company who wants to hire this workforce work with that other company to kind of get their workforce and kind of getting the service from the other company for my company or their own company. I think that's how the contracting model typically works. And it also helps in a bunch of things because that other company is called a contracting company, right? So they usually have a labor force, and because they have tied up with a bunch of other companies, it's very easy to find employment for this bunch of people because they have tied up with many companies, which becomes slightly difficult if they were tied up with just one company, right? So that's one advantage. Second is, let's say if somebody is not available for any personal reasons in that contracting company, then it's easy to find the next replacement because they have a pool of resources and it's easily accessible. Third is, I think they also have their own expertise because I think hiring, training, maintaining that workforce is also slightly different from what happens in the typical IT field. So I think they are more capable of doing that because they've been spending time on that, and hence having a separate company kind of probably makes sense. And for a company where that is not core to the business, right, say delivery or carrying, whatever it is, maybe it is helpful to operate in that mode of employing labor force.
Okay. So like the point which you actually mentioned on when you suddenly there is a spike or when there is low demand, etc. Right? So what it actually means is, I mean, the point I got from there is it like a fixed cost as a variable cost, a good way to think about it? Like what I was thinking is, if you have somebody on payroll and for a month you have to give a notice period, etc. So it's like basically a fixed cost.
Right.
Up to you on how you
I
actually.
think usually a budget is allocated to that firm, and for this is the money I need X number of people, and I think the ask I think mostly ends there, and of course they will say I need people who can read English, etc., etc. But I think the ask kind of stops there and not worry about the PF co. What do I need to do about the leave? Is there a leave reimbursement? I don't know. There's a bunch of things that gets we don't need to handle that as a company, and hence with other company.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I think kind of makes it easy in how do you say it, like really fast moving companies where there is a lot of fluctuations in terms of like the workforce, etc. I think this is probably a model that actually works. Okay. Now, how did this model get so like popular, like basically incentive based model? So as far as I understand, so the incentive based model basically works in instead of paying them per day or per month or per week, part of the salary component is paid at a like a per job level, like per task level, right? Mostly.
Right.
How did this model actually get famous, and what are the typical industries where this is getting used often today?
I have my personal opinions on this, but maybe I think almost every company that we see today, right, is employing some form of incentive or the other, For example, maybe traditional companies, maybe they still have the people on their payroll and full time where they're getting fixed pay and not probably any from the
Hey, there is a little
new
bit of a
startups. I
lag.
don't know.
There's a little bit of a lag in your network.
How about now? Is it better?
Now it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. I was saying that, I mean, I have my own opinions on this. These are just my personal opinions, right? I, I at least am not able to think of a company in the recent times where incentives were not even deployed. Like everything runs on incentives. Of course, there's a fixed pay, base pay, but there's definitely variable pay involved everywhere. Maybe there are traditional companies which are operating in only the fixed pay model. Uh, but at this point of time, almost every company relies on incentives to do it, right? That's what I see across multiple people, and with my own interactions with some of these people who work on the ground, I think there is, if there is no incentives, I'll be very, very honestly surprised and would like to know how the company actually runs its operations. So that's my point of view.
Okay. Yes, there are a couple of interesting, like while researching for this, right? I came across a couple of interesting companies, right? I don't know like what, but I'm sure they have some component which is like variable, but predominantly like a fixed cost on payroll salary model for workers, right? So I know Domino's actually does it to a large extent. Blue Dart actually does it to a large extent. The funny little part is it is very hard for you to poach people from there.
Mhm.
When you want to, when people leave in droves, whenever there is like a, let's say an Amazon sale or a Flipkart sale, etc., people leave in droves because during that sale season, you are going to get a lot of money. Okay. It is easier to hire from all the other companies, but not from these two is what I've heard in the market. Which also brings us to an interesting point about, you know, what is which model is going to be like a long-term beneficial for this company, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it like sometime down the line, right? Now, just so that our users can actually understand, let's break it down. How a typical incentive model for the modern last mile delivery companies actually work.
Right.
So yeah, just give us a basic sense of how to think it. Think of.
So maybe we'll explain at a basic level of like how typically incentive works and some examples of different forms of incentive, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's like uh, you, I want you to do certain work in this constraint. Now, if you do this, then I'm going to pay you additional amount of rupees over and above what you have been usually paid. So that's the typical constraint. Now, I use specific terms like constraint, right? I want you to do X. Now, X can be you go and deliver this to somebody, or you finish this task in X number of times. So basically, I want you to finish X. Let's assume X is any kind of work of just specific to that particular person. Now, it's not enough that you should be doing that X, but you should be doing in X with a specific constraints. What could those constraints be? I want you to finish this X within X, Y minutes. Now, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes. So time is one constraint. Second, I want you to finish X with, let's say, 4.9 out of 5 rating from customers. The customer should feel happy about it. That's one constraint. The third constraint could be I wanted to finish X uh, with absolutely no complaint from the customer. Like that's another constraint. So if you put these constraints of things, now you need to get this deliver X within 5 minutes. So you see the constraints can be numerous, but as a basic level, it's to motivate people in a way which matters to do X, which is in principle helps the business as well as the customers, so that as a return for the job well done, the companies kind of reward the people who do the job with an additional amount over and above the amount that they usually get paid for the particular job. I think that's what the incentive is. Some examples that I can think of. Uh, Again, let's say you do X tasks within 1 hour. Let's say you get about 200 rupees.
Let's
Now
let's take a
we'll do
specific
X
example,
plus
right?
10. We'll take, okay, let's say we do
Let's say grocery
20
delivery.
for the sake of,
Let's
let's
say
say grocery, right? So,
delivery, right?
yeah.
So how to, like, I'm an employee, I come for let's say 8-9 hours a day. I'm going to deliver the groceries in this like 10-15 minutes, whatever constraint you actually have. So how does
Mhm.
the
Yeah. So basically, let's do that. No, so let's assume the person is working for 9 hours, right? For a grocery delivery, let's assume that you could deliver 3 deliveries in an hour, right? Now, for in 9 hours, let's assume 1 hour is for break, so that leaves us with 8 hours. So you can do 8 into 3, 24 deliveries.
Right.
Now let's assume that from data we found that you know 20% of the top 20% of the deliveries are actually doing 35 deliveries, right? And let's say it impacts your unit economics by 4 rupees or whatever. And all these numbers are, but you get the point. Now, this 20 percentile of the people are running at an average of 35 deliveries per day. And let's say between 40 to 80 percentile, you have an average of about, let's say 20 or 50, 15 to 18. And then you have the bottom 20 percentile who is, let's say, doing it 10 to 15 percentile. So that the average comes to about 25. Now, because the majority of the bunch, which is between 40 and 80 percentile, is doing, let's say, 18 or 16, you want them to be able to push to beyond 25, because we have empirical evidence that there are people who can actually deliver 35 deliveries a day, and there are certain behaviors that these people are doing which makes them do 35 deliveries. So as a business, I want to move from this bucket, which is 40 to 80 to 80 to 20. Now, there are a lot of ways to do it, but one of the ways to, okay, now doing 16 deliveries in 8 hours, right? Now today, if you hit 20, let's say 20 deliveries, I'm going to give you plus 50 rupees. Right. Now he will, typically it's a level ladder, right? Like 16 to 25 seems like a lot of jump. So that's a step function. So you go from 16 to 18, 18 to 20, 20 to 20, 25. Of course, the rewards also increase accordingly. Now, what happens to the human mind? He gets tempted. Like I want, now everything is working on the target. They will go the extra boundaries to kind of get that particular money. So they kind of start working hard. Of course, it doesn't work with everybody, but significant majority of the people will get motivated, who are very serious about the work they do, and that kind of motivates them because there is a reward at the end, and hence I'm going to do the work now. And because the rewards are also instantaneous. When I say instantaneous, I get it today, right? I don't need to wait for a month to realize the reward. So the realization of the reward is pretty soon today, and hence they work towards getting the reward. And that's how incentives are being used to increase the productivity of a person.
Okay. Now, okay, this is probably like the most interesting, sensitive topic. What happens to a person who is driven by these kind of incentives, like week after week, month after month?
Yeah, I think as people who work in this industry, I think I know we have business goals, right? And when we look in our rooms and look at the dashboards, we see the productivity charts going up, which is great, which helps the business, right? But at some point, I'm pretty sure all of us talk to these people, because at the end of the day, we need to understand their problems, and then we have to build things to help the business, to help them. I think I'm pretty sure all of us have spoken to these people. Now, this is a reflection of my conversation with folks on the ground. They're not just grocery delivery people. They're people, let's say, who are working on the ground. It could be any company, right? So, so there are a couple of things that comes up as a pattern, right? The first thing that I say, right, they're generally irritated in life. Okay, they don't like being pushed around. It for them, it feels like they don't trust us. Okay, there's a sense of lack of respect, right? Because and then lack of respect, lack of trust, all these things kind of click. So these folks, they at the end of the day want respect. That's number one. That's the general feeling that they have. Second is they don't really have career progression in their life. Like you do it today, okay, I'm doing it for the next 6 months. Like how am I improving as a person? Like what is happening? So while not everybody thinks like this, there are people who do think, okay, I'm doing this, like what happens? Like I'm not growing anywhere in my life. So that feeling of what happens to my career, etc., is probably the other problem that comes. Third is sometimes they tend to think that people are being transformed to machines. Right? They really don't know. The reason why I'm saying that is the following, right? This is a conversation that I had. So I travel quite a bit, and I meet quite a bunch of people. For the people who even come to my house and deliver, I speak to them, trying to understand what's happening. So they log in, let's say at 8 o'clock in the morning. They log out at 10:30, 11 in the night. Now, if you think that's about 15, 16 hours full time on the road, any kind of this job is always on the road. Now, these are the things that they say. I can't have lunch on time because I will lose the order, and hence I will not be able to meet the target. Okay. So they compromise on their own well-being. Of course, 1 or 2 months is okay, but when you do it for 1, 2 years, it takes a toll on the health, right? Second, they don't have a resting place at all. Like most of the people, I'm sure, pretty sure all of the things that we have seen on the road, right? You will see there's a group of people on the road who are waiting and chatting. The friends are always on mobile phones.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's health is a big problem for them because of all these recurring schedules. Second is because they cannot take break and they have to hit some of these targets. I think they are always in a constant rush. There's a lot of tension, and because they have to hit the target, they kind of speed up on the road, and a lot of things happen. Right. Third, which I heard very recently, is that I think there are some people who do it in a very fair way. I think there are examples even today where it's probably not fair. It's like a binary form of incentives, which is like if you hit 25 trips, let's say we spoke about 25 trips, right? In that example, let's say if you hit 25 rupees, I give you 300 rupees.
Okay.
If you hit 24 rupees, sorry, 24 trips, you will not get the 300 rupees. Now you see the problem, right? The guy has actually managed to do from 16 to 24, but you don't get the incentive. You're not like you don't get it. It's either 25 or you get the money of 16. Now, all these kind of things, it's helpful for a business. But what happens on the guy's mind? Like I worked hard, I tried, I actually showed, I didn't hit, but I don't get paid.
Yeah.
Right. So these are the kind of things which kind of plays in the mind, and I think it has little more long-term impacts on how, but we can discuss that now, or we can have in a separate conversation later to this discussion. But I think health, respect, career progression, and being treated with care, I think are some of the general concerns that I think I can see this as a pattern across not just one like industry, but any on-ground field, right? These are the core things that I hear very often.
Wow. It's yeah, so this is one anecdotal example, right, which I can kind of like relate to what you said is there are people who don't take bathroom breaks during the day. They don't eat, they don't take bathroom breaks so that they don't lose out on all these incentives.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. And these are like young people, and a lot of them are graduates, right?
Yeah.
Like the point you made about career progression, a lot of these guys are actually graduates. A lot of these guys are just showing up just to, take this as a temporary gig. So until they find something reasonable, but they kind of like get pulled into this ecosystem where you can never get out, right? Combine that with the health reasons you spoke about, and combine that with like the overall mental health problems that they're actually going through. It's pretty bleak picture for people in this particular ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think, see, I mean, as a business, right, I think we might also tend to get, to look at a problem with just one angle. I have done that myself. Like, I think it, it was not like this is my view all the 7 years. I think I have done a fair job of squeezing the performance out of these people, and I was very straight-minded. But as we all grow up, as we all speak to people and empathize, I think some of these opinions have come out. Uh, I think it's important to. This is what I think. So fundamentally, I think what happens is when we say we want to improve a metric from X to Y, we start believing that the other person is not going to be a truthful person. I think that's where there is very low trust in the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first thing is the guy is not going to do the job. That's how we start thinking as a problem statement. Now, if that is the base, then I don't see this incentive is the only way that will think. But the reason I'm telling is I have done this myself. And I was like, this doesn't sound right as a personal human being. As simple as giving a dashboard kind of did wonders, because we sat with them and I was like, why are you not able to do your job? Then they kind of understood that there's somebody listening to me. They kind of opened up. But it took me literally 1 month for me to, sit with them every day and get the confidence from them. And where they started opening up because they now know that I kind of is genuinely interested in them. And then they started speaking. So incentives was not needed to kind of improve the productivity. All I just needed to, they need to trust in me. And as simple as putting dashboards kind of helped improve. So I think if we're able to flip that switch in our mind saying, hey, they are nice people at heart, maybe there are some exceptions. I'm not saying everybody is nice or everybody does not want to do the job, but giving the benefit out to them saying that they are all nice people. They're here to do the great job. Starting from that might be a great place to evaluate different ways to solve this problem.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, this is like a note to all the product managers out there who sit in their AC rooms in a conference room, design product for people on the ground who are delivering day in day out.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of us do. Like same here. Like when I started my career, I was also sitting in my office and say like, hey, this is what needs to be done. You hit this number, you put this target, and people automatically improve. Like it works from a math point of view, right?
absolutely.
But in terms of it doesn't have the trust. It doesn't have a long-term benefit. We'll talk about that probably as a next point.
Yeah,
In terms of like long-term health of the company, the business, or general overall satisfaction of the people, doesn't get us anywhere. Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Just give me 1 second. I think I'll just switch my internet connection to make sure this works. Let me know if this works.
You can hear your audio.
Okay.
I can see. Yeah.
Seems better. Let's see. Cool. So now let's talk about this part. Like, how does it impact the business? Because we're all thinking that this is going to be the fantastic thing for the business overall, right? We're improving productivity, everybody's happy, like all the metrics are going up, and that's kind of why the adoption is actually growing more and more. What do you think the long-term impact to a business could be because of this particular model?
Yeah. See, definitely there's an impact in the short term. It definitely helps the business. The numbers on the balance sheet look good. All the metrics look good. There's absolutely no doubt at all. Now, we will take this example in a typical our teams, right? The way we work in corporates, and then I think it will become more clearer. Now, when we leave, usually we have 2-3 months notice period.
Right.
Now, when we put on a paper, our managers kind of, they're not happy because I have to find a new person. They have to do the knowledge transfer and then to train the job. And the new person might probably take a quarter, 3 months to get a sense of the business, and another 3 months to understand the problems, which is basically 6 months, and then meaningfully start contributing to the business. And we are already looking at 6 months of time that is needed for a person in the office to kind of transition, right? Now, although some of these tasks look easy on the ground, the impact is the same. The more change that happens on the ground, because at the end of the day, these are the people who will be close to customers. They are the ones who are actually delivering the service to the customer. Now, if they keep churning and you keep new people, right, the volumes that we get from customers are not going to drop. But there's literally no time to train. There's literally no time to understand what are the jugaads that we have done in the system, right? Typically, we do a lot of things like this will work. The guy does not understand the system. It is because he has not been trained. He doesn't understand some of these softwares and loopholes, etc., and how to use them. His performance is obviously going to get impacted, right? And we eventually come to blame that he's not working well. Right? That's the output that we usually hear, but we still talk about the first two, right? So I think it's a lot of flux when people change, especially in an operation setup. If that happens, I think your service levels will obviously be hit, right? And it will eventually going to get impacted to your customers. And obviously, the customers probably will give you 1 or 2 chances, or maybe 3 chances if they really love your brand. And in a world where we have a lot of alternatives, the 3 chances are enough for the customer to switch. Because some of these grown folks are actually changing quite a bit. So, which is why it is possible, it's important to keep your ground force as basically the attrition as low as possible. I think our industry has an attrition about 25-35%. So that's pretty huge. It's almost like half the workforce is changing in like 2 months. So with this level of flux, I really don't know how do we give a stable service to the customers. I think very important for customers to feel that they can rely on the brand. And we as a business should be able to have the confidence to be able to deliver the service to the business.
So that point you mentioned about like how the people actually churn out in 2 months. This is what I heard also. Like the average time for a person in a particular last mile delivery company in this particular model is around 3 months. Now, if you're going to take a month, even if you say like, hey, your training program is amazing and you're able to find out people in like 10, 15 days, you're still looking at like around like 45 days for the person to become productive. And
Yeah,
another 45 days will probably productive, and the last 10 days is not going to work and it's going to quit.
correct.
With this kind of churn, and every time you hire a person, you still have to pay the bonus, the hiring bonus to the contractor and other people, right? So that's kind of how the industry actually works overall. With this churn and the competition and the poaching and other things that's actually happening, does it like it definitely works for some folks, okay, but does it actually work because the model is actually super profitable, or have they not explored the like a large fixed plus some amount of incentive kind of like a bonus model which some of the other companies actually do? Because right now it also becomes very difficult for you to move to the other model even if you want to. It's kind of like set in certain ways, right?
I know, I agree with you. So I think it's more of the latter. I think, I mean, if you go and tell your management, right, I want to experiment with maybe 80% fixed and 20% variable, I'm like, hey, what are you saying? Like, I don't think it's the norm. I'm not saying it will work, but I
Yeah,
think it's definitely worth an experimentation. Like, I think we should treat it as a part of an experiment, try to understand what are the medium to long-term benefits.
yeah,
But I don't know if we even have the room for the conversation as of today. So, because it's extremely drastically different from what is otherwise a norm in the industry, right? Like,
yeah.
for example, let's assume that 80% of the workforce will be intrinsically motivated, right? Like incentives, the other problem with the incentive is just reduces to extrinsic motivation. If you cut the incentive, no, people stop working,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's like that, right?
They go on strike. Forget about not working. They go on strike.
That's
Yeah,
it. They work for the money. They never work for the company. Right? That's the
yeah,
thing. Because at somewhere, I think everyone should feel some amount of, hey, I want to work for the company because I want the customers to feel good. Because if they are good, then my prospects of growing in the company will grow big. That loop I think is kind of miserably broken today. They are working only for that money for today, but they don't have a site or a progress track kind of saying, hey, you do this for 3 months, these are the metrics, this is how you're going to move next in the company, this is what you're going to handle. Then once you do that for 6 months, these are the targets, this is how you're improving, you go to next. I don't think there is a clear pathway, but couple that along with short-term incentives might work, right? And also treating them like respect them and giving them the benefit around and taking them along the journey, which typically happens in your headquarters. I think that mindset is also maybe important to evolve for these workforce. Yes, it will take time in the short term, but businesses are here for long term anyway.
probably. Yeah, it's a more sustainable model actually.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So treat them with respects. Just treat them with respect. Give them a career path, and probably include some amount of like interesting motivation. Create the trust.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's a mix of
Trust has to be earned.
expectations. Yeah.
It'll happen by itself. Yeah, yeah, that's very true. So I was reading this yesterday, like in preparation, right? So apparently they did a study. Your incentive based pay, performance based pay is what they call. So this incentive model actually apparently increases your performance by over 20 to 25%, depending on what our model you actually employ, etc. Right? And the non-monetary incentives, mostly in terms of like any kind of like appreciation, etc., and some amount of career growth, apparently reduces your attrition by 30%,
Okay.
and improves your productivity by actually by 15 to 20%.
Okay.
Right. So if that is the case, then it totally makes sense that I think we kind of like gone and we are in a like a specific path, and it's very hard for us to kind of deviate and go after. I'm also believing that people have not given the regular payroll model enough of a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like I said, I think if I'm pretty sure the benefits will definitely be there. It's a matter of time. You can't improve productivity probably in a day because you need to build the trust, right?
yeah,
Once the trust is there, I think people will definitely work for the company and not work for the incentive. I think
yeah,
that's the flip that needs to happen. It will take time, but I think in the medium to long term, I'm pretty sure that's more sustainable and helpful for the business
yeah,
than this
yeah.
current.
So one of the levers, like the which could actually influence this transition is uh, the supply demand problem.
Mm.
So till now, the supply has been plenty, right? But it kind of turned, the switch kind of like turned in around 2019, if I remember, 19 to 20, when you really couldn't hire any more people in the market. You really had to go to tier 3, tier 4 towns, set up institutions, train them, bring them, give them space to live, onboard them as contractor. I know a lot of companies actually did this. It's like they have specific programs, right? It is not easy as just hiring them, but they had to like go to these locations, find the graduates and bring them here and did all that stuff. And that era is actually over. So right now, if you look at the statistics, when these quick commerce companies actually came in, they had to pay double the amount of what existing companies are actually paying because they couldn't find people. Because the supply is all right. Now that I think the supply demand switch is actually happening, and probably that could be a big motivator for people to move away from this particular model and try to focus more and more on, fixed plus incentive. So it's just also want to do one call out, right? The incentive based model per se is not wrong. Like sales always had incentives in any company, like it always works on incentive. Retail always works on incentives. Across the world, people have been using incentives. The problem is when you take it a little too far, where the long-term health, the growth and like the mental health of people actually comes for a toss, right? I think we need to pull back a little and kind of enable a sustainable way for people, for the company and also the people in the company to kind of like grow. But yeah, like coming back to the point, yeah, I think the supply demand, that positioning is actually switching, and that would probably influence a lot of these guys to rethink about the model they're actually working with.
Yeah, I think even like you said, right, the amount of workforce are demanding more. The input costs are only going to increase for the business. They're possibly making them less sustainable from a unit economics point of view. So maybe that company which takes the stride in boldly experimenting with different ways, maybe they're, by the way, they're also okay taking lesser amount as long as I have a sense of accomplishment and belonging, etc., etc. I think as long as it's okay to pay less, and if you treat them, maybe there is a way for everyone to be happy in the ecosystem, right? All stakeholders can be happy. Maybe I am yet to see how that is going to transform, but really hoping that somebody will do it soon.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for. All right. Cool. Yeah, so that's basically what I had. But if you have any final thoughts, anything you want to share with respect to this topic, feel free.
I mean, I think it was a great discussion. Honestly, I think, especially speaking in a public forum like this, we have spoken this about quite a bit earlier as well. But I think I think we are all not in this with respect to this or anywhere, right? We're generally biased towards somebody or someone. We assume that everybody is doing something with a ill intention, right? That's how we start thinking as a problem statement. And I think it's probably okay, even if it is true, right? We should probably start with a base zero where we should assume that, hey, genuinely, why is the other person doing it? Maybe he's doing it, but there are a ton of reasons for it, right? It's important to be able to understand some of these ground level ideas or reasons why people behave the way they do, and then work backwards from that to figure out what is the problem that we do. Maybe incentive is the right solution, but I think having an understanding on one step before that and why is a person behaving the way he is doing is extremely critical to understand without any bias. I think in these incentives, I think it's very obviously understood when you speak to people. But I think any of these problem statements, I think everybody does things for a reason. It's important to understand that. Not what they do, but why they do. The emotional part of it on what is going on in their mind and heart is probably what we need to understand before even building solutions for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my thought. Yeah.
It's a fantastic note to end the webinar. Thanks a lot for coming on the webinar, man. This has been quite amazing, and I think it's a very, very important topic. Not usually talked in a public forum. I'm happy that we were able to have this conversation. We'll take a part of it. We'll probably do one more session on like the actual, how do they actually transition? Like probably we can geek out on that a little bit in a future session.
Definitely. Thank you, Bala. Thanks for inviting me. This was really wonderful, and to be able to talk with you is even more amazing.
Awesome. All right. Take care. I'll now take more of your weekend. Have fun. Bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye.